Fantastic. Good afternoon to you all. I hope you've had a great morning. I know I have, and I think the panel have as well. Great lunch. We're going to keep it high energy, so don't you worry about falling asleep on us. Positive behaviour change, right? Yes, my name is Aarti Anhal. I'm the founder of a company called Before 9, and everything we do is actually about integrating optimal health and human performance into how we run our businesses. How do we operate? How do we deliver change? How do we manage risk in a way that enables people to flourish? So I think the really wonderful consensus, and perhaps maybe the questions can provide us with a point of difference, is that if this was a debating session, I think everyone on this panel would be supporting the view that this house believes well-being is not just a set of activities. It is an outcome of organisational life. And so what can organisations do to develop and integrate behaviours that cultivate positive mental health, enable people to flourish into their systems, processes and culture? And we're very fortunate because we've heard the word culture spoken about a lot today already in the CEO session, in the Accenture session, and I'm sure in other sessions that you've participated in. But we're going to dig into that a little bit more today. So we have Michael, who is Head of Learning at Knight Frank, and his focus is really workplace optimal behaviour, so we're going to hear some about that. We've got Deborah from Gatwick Airport, who really is the expert in building and leading high-performance health teams that deliver value to their employers. We've got Nicky, who really ensures that at BioBeats, all of the preventative health tech they develop has a scientific and evidence-based theory behind it. And then we have the wonderful Pauline at the end from Lloyds of London. And in addition to doing the great work she does at Lloyds, you may also know her as the pioneer of the Dive-In Festival, which has been going for a few years and is now worldwide across 50 cities. Great panel. So I guess my first question, and it's going to be to you, Michael, is tell me where your approach to integrating mental health and well-being into Knight Frank's culture, where did that start and where did it come from?
Great, no pressure. Let's go straight in. I think for us, one of the biggest things, the journey started in 2016. It started when we recognized that because of technology and the growing demand of customers wanting to be essentially getting people to talk to them 24/7, we realized we needed to look at what was happening within our industry. And we went out to 30,000 customers. We took a hard look at ourselves, and the feedback we got was, it was cruel, but we needed to hear it. And I'm sure most of you will know when you hear estate agents weren't trusted. That was a big, not so big of a shock for us, but it became a big thing that we began to recognize that actually we were being told we weren't trusted, we were traditional, we weren't really providing what needed to be provided to our customer base. We also went to our employees, what needed to change. And their response was, we are being asked to work more and more and more, and we're actually not having any time to switch off. So we suddenly realized that we were in a bit of a double-edged sword. So we did a couple of things right away. The very first thing we did was we decided to invest in our people. And by doing that, that meant, first and foremost, we started changing all of our office spaces. So one of the things we started to do was we essentially started eradicating this whole you walk in and no one sees you anymore. And instead we started creating much more of this almost a cafe collaboration WeWork style approach into the working practices. We've done the same in our headquarters. So all of our headquarters has completely been revamped into a WeWork style, getting people to mix and talk to each other, because what we found was that actually this needed to happen. We then did something which I think hasn't been done before, and I came in as head of learning and I said, if you want to make behavioral change, when you're training people, when you're developing them, take them off-site. So we actually invested £4 million in a brand new training facility off-site, completely collaborative, open spaces, a chance where people actually start to learn. And the response has been, since we did that, that 96% of our people say, I'm actually learning more because I'm not being dragged out of an office environment where I finish it in a training room and then I'm being stopped in a corridor at a break to check emails or get on a conference call or deal with something. And that became a big change. We embedded coaching in our program, but probably the biggest thing, we actually started at the very top. We got all the equity partners in the firm on the program, and we had them go through it. We had them input on what needed to be happening. As a result of that, we gave them clear KPIs. They are now accountable for the well-being of their people in their annual appraisals, effective conversations, and the working environments they are creating. And because of that, we also ended up finding that our people started to responding more and better to a much more proactive work-life balance. And we threw in on top of that as well, to meet the customer demands, resilience and mindfulness training to all of our people. And linking to it, we threw in an app where we had the generations. So we started actually looking at things such as digital learning, podcasts, so people can actually switch off on the way home and not be integrated with constantly checking emails all the time. So that's a very quick overview in 3 minutes.
That's great. I'm just going to ask you one quick question before
Yeah.
I move on to Deborah, and that was around the comms piece. So I know when we spoke, you said, look, actually, you can take people out of training and they return back to 100 emails.
Yeah.
Or actually, we say we don't want people to be bombarded by technology, but they still are.
Yeah.
Can you just share with us some of the protocols you put in place there that are very practical?
So we did two key things. We promised that we would reduce email, we would reduce time and give people back 20% of their time, so 1 day a week. So to do that, we started stopping the amount of email traffic, and actually we created an app where people can actually share on a platform information, and instead of emailing each other, people now chat on a forum. And that turned into suddenly what started in one part of the business, it's gone completely wide across the entire of our 2,400 people in the UK. We're now moving away from email and moving everything onto Microsoft Office Teams, because actually what we're finding is having one platform where everyone could share spreadsheets, information, projects, as opposed to how many of us have been in that situation? You're working on a project with someone, the spreadsheet comes in, you haven't even checked it because 5 other emails with the same spreadsheet updated are in there. We've realized this is just creating havoc, so we're moving away from that and creating a brand new digital strategy altogether on that as well.
That's great. So actually giving people the practical tools and backing it up with processes that says, yeah, when we say we're going to reduce email traffic, this is how. And I think that's a really key part around this whole piece. It's not just telling people what they need to do, but giving them the tools to do it.
And it's been important to bring it in with the customers. So one of the things to reduce it from a customer point of view is we're working on our websites so customers can book viewings directly online on a calendar. That date works, that time I book it, they get a calendar invite, and it's no longer the back and forth of emails between employees. So we're trying to create less of that to happen.
Brilliant, thank you. So Deborah, working and living in a world that is actually operational, safety-driven, regulated, but then also highly commercial as an airport operator. How have you been approaching this topic?
So about 18 months ago, I arrived at Gatwick with a bit of a bang, nothing to do with drones. They just happened to follow. And one of the things about looking at an organisation that's highly unionised, it is operational, but more importantly, it's safety critical. And when you're going through your airport, what you want to make sure is that our people are ensuring your safety when you're up in the air. So working in that environment can be highly driven. It is performance-led. It can often feel dehumanized because people are very interested from the CAA and regulation as to are we detecting whether things are going through people's bags that shouldn't go through it and things like that. So actually getting to know the business and understand the business, from our firefighters on site to our security officers to the people who perform really great tasks in our offices, you truly need to understand the operation and also what it is you're trying to achieve. Part of any strategy where I'm setting off to look at from a people performance point of view, I'm a clinician by background, I'm truly looking at what is our prevention strategy, have we got one, what does it look like, what does it feel like, what do our people think of it? And therefore looking at the risks on site, so the risks of Gatwick and what are the risks that come onto our site. We're clearly a massive infrastructure that can be a terrorist attack, or people actually come to our site and do harm to themselves or others. I see Gatwick as like a mini community. So everything that happens in a community, from trafficking to people coming and committing suicide, all happens, and our people are exposed to that. To actually looking at rehabilitation properly from a work-focused point of view. And I'm not talking about an EAP service. I'm truly looking at how are we rehabbing people, be it a physical or mental illness, and keeping them at work. Because for me, work is a life outcome in the same way you look at good housing. And work sometimes gets the demonized, where people get signed off because it's always seen as the big baddie. I truly wanted to turn that around, because keeping people in structure and routine is fundamental if we're actually going to enable people with mental illness to remain or return to work sooner. And I liken it, and I'm really more of a rugby girl, but football, when the goal goes in, that's when, if somebody's gone off sick, actually what's happened on the, I know there's a midfield, but the defence and the attack, whatever those are, what is the systematic failure that's happened that somebody's resulted in going, in taking time off? Workability goes at 5 weeks. So one of the things when I was building that is actually what do we need to do to enable people to return to work sooner? One of the things that I won't talk about too much is the intervention and the rehabilitation, but actually I wanted to look at how do we educate people. So today I've heard a lot of stuff, but actually how many of you, just a show of hands, will put your mouth, or you touch raw chicken and put your hands into your mouth? Just so we all know, are you all working in labs, seeing E. coli every day? No. But in this country, we've educated you brilliantly between E. coli, putting your hand onto raw chicken, and becoming ill. How many of us in today's education, or even your own education, did we teach you how your minds work? Have we ever taught you how your moods are? How does your brain work when you're making decisions? You know, some people, like Barack Obama, was taught very well. Not all presidents are the same. But when you understand, how your brain works in decision making, actually you can start to stack the odds in your favor and understand how your mind works. And I truly, truly, truly believe in mental health education, not the rest of the stuff that can happen, because when you get to signs and symptoms, you're already at the cliff edge. So part of my strategy was, what's our prevention strategy? And there's 2 strings to that. I'm waiting for a finger to go up to tell me to stop talking. Yeah. So there's just 2 strings. There's, importantly, what do we give the tools to our people? But the biggest impact on people's well-being is their relationship with their line manager. And until we address that, and until we understand that truly, there is no point in talking about interventions if you're returning people to a, inverted, toxic environment. And people join organizations, they leave bad managers. So one of the fundamentals that I've been working on, because I sort of get in everywhere, and my COO is probably the sickest sight of me at this stage, but it's truly understanding, how do my line managers engage others? How do they take responsibility? How do they make those decisions that are fundamental? How do they know their people? So some of the work we're doing is not just to your point, we don't have 4 million to spend, your cost of flights would go up, but actually taking people out to do very interactive, classroom-based. We've got a brilliant company called Lane 4 with ex-Olympians helping us to work out how do we build relationships to know our people. Because if we know our people, then we can start to understand things that are happening.
Great. And what I love about that is that we will talk about this piece around people management, because obviously, Michael, you mentioned coaching and coaching managers to become better at having the right conversations generally with their staff. And now you've taken that forward for that piece. Thank you so much. Nicky, technology. Tell us about that and the relationship with behaviour change at an organisational level.
Oh, just a little one then. Firstly, thank you, Deborah. I could listen to you all day talk about that. I agree with everything.
Oh, thanks.
So my background is business psychology. I was talking to Michael earlier about the joys of trying to get external training rooms and how important that is. I worked in that for many years, and I realised that actually I was doing all these different types of training. I was doing manager training, coaching, that kind of thing. What was really important under all of this was well-being. That if people are going to come to work, they need to be well in order to be able to perform. And I created some training programs around the concept of burnout and psychological detachment, so switching off after work. And if I do say so myself, we created some pretty amazing courses in our time. They were all science-backed, evidence-based. But something that was really getting to me was that we'd do this fantastic course in an external training room with lunch provided, and everyone had a great time. All the happy sheets were sort of signed off. But 4 weeks later, 6 weeks later, people entirely forgot that they even had that experience, let alone the habits that we were trying to create in that session. And that's why I got really interested in digital. I'm actually wearing my digital uniform today, it's my Steve Jobs roll neck. And that's where I really think there's so much potential there. And there's 3 things with digital that I think can really help and does help behaviour change. especially in the workplace. This is incredibly important. I think this is a huge place for change. So firstly, it's scalable. I don't know how many people in the room and what sort of organisations you come from, but from the people I've spoken to at lunchtime, it's everything from sort of 10 people to hundreds of thousands. And it doesn't matter how big the size of your organisation, it's usually very hard to get everyone in a room together at the same time. There's a lot of people working from home, people working from remote. Our BioBeats offices are based in London, I'm based in Bristol. You know, it's that kind of trying to get everyone in the room at the same time. So with digital, you've got the scalable solution. You can get the same things to people anywhere in the world, which is incredibly important, same type of content. The second one is that it's available 24/7. There's been some really great sessions on mental health champions and making sure there's support in the office. But I don't know if anyone's has got a fire safety champion in the office. Whenever we've had a fire, that person's never in the office. They're never there, and you can see the vest on the back of the chair. So there's this element where, is that person around? And again, I go back to, if we've got remote workers, we've got people who are at home by themselves, how are they going to connect with this person? And even if there's great connections, there's email, there's phone. I mean, we're midday Monday, but I'm not sure how everyone was feeling on a Sunday night. They're usually not feeling great, ready for Monday morning. So is there someone was a service that's available on Sunday night, 10 p.m., that someone can call and connect with as well? So it's sort of 24/7 availability that technology can provide. And then finally, and my favourite point, is personalisation. Like I said, we had this fantastic Wellbeing course that was based in science, and we had a lot of good feedback, but not everyone was ready for that course at that moment in time. A lot of people self-selected, so they were there because they wanted to do it. Some people were gently encouraged, mainly line managers, and they might go away with a few hints and tips on how to look after themselves, but it wasn't exactly right for that moment in time for them. And I think that's really important, that we find solutions that are scalable, accessible, but are also targeted for that individual. And that's what we try and do at BioBeats as well. We bring body and mind together. So we have an app and a wearable. We're connecting the way people think and the way people feel and what's going on with their bodies. So an example might be some people might be really great at doing their step count and getting that every day, but they never sit down and take a moment just to calm their mind and check in with themselves. On the other way, you might have someone who's really into mindfulness, think it's absolutely fantastic, but hasn't seen a gym, in months. So it's sort of this personalised approach, working where people are right now, and sort of stretching them a little bit to help them look after themselves and get some positive behaviour change around mental health and health in general as well.
Great, thank you. And actually, I was so excited about maintaining momentum, I forgot to tell you to ask questions on Slido, but some have actually come through, and I would invite you to continue to ask them. And what's great is actually there was a question here about supporting positive behaviour change with remote workers. Yeah. So actually, it's great that you've actually been able to tie that in.
Yeah,
excellent.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So Pauline, Lloyds of London, what an institution. And actually working for a market of independence that you don't own.
That's right.
How does positive behaviour change work there?
So I think it's probably important to say that, so when people think of Lloyds and they think of, as a corporation, you must have lots of employees. We've got about 1,000 people across the globe. And in our building, probably about 600 in the corporation that work for the same organisation that I'm employed by. But we've got 44,000 pass holders. That's people that can come in and out of the building with their passes every day. So a couple of years ago, what we wanted to do is to really raise awareness of mental well-being, and off of the back of some of the work we've done around Dive In, we really wanted to create this sort of groundswelling of champions. And in essence, what we wanted to do is to try and litter across all of those organisations people that had an understanding of well-being, what mental well-being looked like, how they could be a champion in their own organisation. So to do that, we took the conscious decision not to go down the route of mental health first aiders. And that's not as a disservice to the organisation, but what we realised was that when you go down that programme, that route of mental health first aid, you have to have a really strong infrastructure for individuals to come back into their organisation and know what to do with that training that they've been under. And we'd already seen the effects of people going off and doing the training and then coming back and not having the opportunity to really practice that once they got back. And because these individuals work for different organisations, we thought the best option would be to really start off by building up the knowledge and awareness of individuals across the market. So over the last year and a half, we've trained around 150 champions, and they come along on a one-day course, and we really have three aims. One is to raise their own understanding of mental well-being and what that looks like, and to really a bit of a deep dive into mental health. The second is to be able to provide them with tools and resources to go back into their own organisations and to deliver a mini session around mental well-being in their own organisations. And then the third is for them to understand what it means to be a champion. And in that instance, how they can put their hands up and say, hey, I'm a champion, I'm here to signpost. Now, they came up with a great idea to make sure that they were visible. And what we do is we bring them back. We run alumni lunches a couple of times a year so that as a group, they've got a community. They came up with the green dog because during their training, they watched the black dog. They thought it would be good to have a black dog, and then they realised nobody would ask them about why they're wearing a black dog. So they decided if they made the dog green, people would go, why are you wearing a green dog? And it would be a conversation starter. So, and it's a really great way to show how champions that came together, they've all done their courses, they've done their one day, and they've come back for their alumni lunch. And you can only get the green dog if you come back. So you come back and you have your alumni lunch and you have your green dog, and they came up with that idea. It's theirs and they own it. And what we encourage them to do when they come back on their lunches to not just share where it's working, where it's not working, but we also upskill them throughout the course of the year. So some of our champions have come along to This Can Happen. We've had some of our champions come back and learn about storytelling. So how can they create their own voice and how can they improve their own storytelling approach and skill set? So it's very much about creating, I call them a little army of champions that can go out. And what we've seen over the last 2 years is that actually more organisations put in more resources into both mental wellbeing in their own organisations, thinking about how they can duplicate that training and that infrastructure in their own firms. And most importantly, the champions coming back and saying, we want more. What more can you offer us and what more can you provide? Their role is to signpost. Their role is not to act in any greater capacity, but to raise awareness and signpost in their organisation. And if you're in the Lloyds market, if you've ever been in the building and there are all of these people milling around, running back and forth, knowing that there's someone with a little green dog, and you can know that that's a champion and that's a wellbeing champion is really important because they don't have to work for your firm, but they all know each other in our marketplace. So that's our Wellbeing Champion programme.
Great, and what I would love to do is just follow up a bit more on that, just in terms of culture. So the insurance industry, the city, you know, there are famous tales of what brokers and underwriters get up to on a Thursday night. There's a whole culture there.
It's not on a Thursday only, all through the week.
Right. So actually, for you as Lloyds, that influencing piece at a wider cultural level, what's the work that you are currently doing or hoping to do there?
So for those that haven't seen, we've had quite a lot of exposure in the press over the last year almost around the culture of the Lloyds market. And if I just pick on some of the wellbeing elements, you know, the fact that out of 6,000 respondents, 24% that said that they had seen excessive consumption of alcohol in the market is worrying, and that 40% said that they felt under excessive pressure in their roles in the workplace. So wellbeing has become a really central part of our programme around cultural change. And we're looking at other elements, so we're looking at gender, of course, we're looking at leadership, but wellbeing is the fourth pillar of our cultural transformation programme. And for us, we've set up an external advisory board, and we have identified, I won't say who in case they don't accept, but the expert that we would like to join that external advisory board to help us really focus on wellbeing at a much broader capacity across that marketplace. So we want to build on the work of the Champions programme. We want to continue to build that programme out, but we also recognise that there's much more of a need to focus on wellbeing within the building, and that's everything from the structures to the catering and the offerings that are there. So it's there's a huge change there in terms of how we look at wellbeing. And within the corporation, so the firm that I'm employed by, we're moving wellbeing away from what has traditionally been a reward-focused activity into the work that I do within the talent development inclusion space, because we really recognise the need to be able to tie it into both how we develop our leaders, our managers, but also the work that we do around culture.
Great, thank you. So you mentioned pressure. You also mentioned leadership. And now there's been a great question here about senior manager accountability. So actually probably wanting more of an expansion on how do you make people accountable. And I know that actually Deborah's also, as well as Michael, got something to ask there. So let's take that one on now. For you, making it a reality of actually holding people accountable, how has that actually been operationalised?
I think it started on, we had to do it in three ways, really. And I think it's really important that when you're doing any kind of program where you're trying to change behavior, my experience has always been where organizations decide, oh, we're going to roll this out, we're just going to communicate it to people, tick box, done, and that's it. That won't work. So we did three things. The very first thing is, and like I say, it was very much a marathon, not a sprint. So in January of 2018, we brought the top 100 leaders of the entire firm together. And over a day, we spent working with them, making them understand why this was important. We took them right back to what the research told us, what was happening, the difference that was coming in from our clients and our people as well, to get them on board. Once we had them on board, we then opened it up and then cascaded this down to all of our people at a series of events over 2 days. And we were doing it 400 people at a time. And it was led by myself and what we called at the time was our CX, Customer Experience Exec Group, which were all the equity partners. And that was really important because what it suddenly did was it had the leaders of the business saying, we're investing in you. And we want you to tell us what changes need to be made. But ultimately, the next thing we did was once we rolled it out, we actually brought in a provider to help us find what we call the leadership accountabilities that every senior manager was responsible for. And that was the big shift because actually the biggest challenge we've had has been, you know, and I saw on one of those specifically the males because we're going to own for what it is. You know, it is a very heavy male-dominated industry, especially at the senior leadership team, and we needed to change that. But also because our generations were changing. So by making them accountable, one of the things we did was we started to actually hold generational panels. So we actually brought, at conferences, we would have panels of baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z on stage. And we would ask them all the same questions, seeing how that was evolving. And what was fascinating was when you'd see these baby boomers in the room suddenly recognizing, oh my God, actually, we need to make a change in how we think about things, but vice versa, the younger generations recognizing that, yes, you also need to adapt how you're working because we are living in a time where our younger generations are, we've all heard it called the snowflake generation, and it's because the minute we hit them with pressures, you know, we've had young people leave the business going, I can't cope when you hit me with targets and pressure. Guess what? That's the reality. But rather than say you're not cut out for it, what are we doing to support them? And so the leadership accountabilities, the coaching programs, all of these start to really find that balance a bit more.
Thank you. And similarly, I know, Deborah, you have a Frontline Future Leaders program. So how have you addressed this accountability piece?
So one of the things is you've got to feel sorry for line managers in a way because they get pressure coming down, they get pressure coming up. And sometimes it can just be like that simmering pan of boiling water and you're never quite sure what way to go. Clearly, this is not the first leadership program that's ever arrived at Gatwick. And, you know, people go on leadership courses and then they come back and revert to what they've always done. So we recognized actually our people were telling us various different types of things. Our union were telling us how awful everything is and various things. So as an organization, we've made a commitment to our frontline leaders in their Fit to Lead program. And we've made a commitment that we will give them time because time is very precious and you can't build relationships without time. We've also made a commitment that we will empower them because in a hierarchical organization, you become paralyzed by not being able to make decisions or fearful you're going to make the wrong decisions. So it was really, really important that as an organization, Gatwick Airport Limited are saying, we will empower you and we will help to understand what that means and what that looks like. And thirdly, we wanted to invest in their development, not just that blanket approach or, you know, doing a day or a workshop or a couple of flip charts, some models around learning and development, because I have been in those rooms with the learning and development models and sometimes I've lost the will to live myself. But actually looking at it, how do we do it in a very fun way that actually can translate into tangibles when you go back out to work with your people? They were the commitments Gatwick made. They're the commitments we will be held accountable to, because this is not just a one-sided approach. It is really important that those leaders hold us to account, because we're going to hold them to account for their delivery. Part of their delivery is they need to understand and know their people and the well-being of their people. They're not all becoming doctorologists, but the well-being of their people is paramount. And actually how they deliver is equally as paramount to that equation. So I emphasize they're not going to become some sort of therapist sitting down to understand everything that's going on, but they will get to know their people and they need to care for their people. Now, if you don't have those behavioural skills, because we're going through a process of understanding that, we'll have a very honest conversation, because it's really important we get this right, and it's really important that the people who work for us want to come to work and actually want to do a good job, because that's what most people want to do.
I think that caring piece is really, really important, because, you know, it's often where you get a lot of managers, you say, how many of you take the time to actually ask your team members, how are they? And I'm from Canada, I've been here 20 years, and I will still, even when people say to me, how are you? I'll say, do you want the British answer or the Canadian one? Because they're very two different answers. And what you end up finding is people say, no, I want the Canadian answer. And I'm like, you know what, I'm having a real crap day today. Suddenly, someone goes, so am I. And you can see the weight that lifts off their shoulders, because they can be honest as opposed to having an authentic conversation. And then you suddenly find people actually come and see you to talk to you about something. And that makes a difference. And I think that caring piece is so vital, because otherwise you're never going to make those positive step changes you want to make.
And I think it's an interesting one, because when you talked earlier about one-to-ones, creating the right environment, I mean, this is the point even around introducing a coaching way of being for managers and leaders. Just getting people to ask open questions and to listen, using coaching skills, not only opens up the environment for talking about mental health and anything else, it actually contributes to well-being, because we start to feel engaged, encouraged, accomplished by achieving something, because we're being asked to grow through that as a learning and development opportunity rather than command and control.
I think there's another thing. It's a two-way thing for me, because I think we often expect the manager to do all of this with the employee, but actually I equally expect our employees to ask their managers how they are.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I think we're missing a massive trick. You know, we are all individuals, we're all humans, we're all going to, I don't swear, mess up and at times. But, you know, this is and we, as managers, will have stuff that's going on outside of that working environment. And we're only going to crack well-being in the workplace if we can truly ask each other how are you really doing? And a bit like the Irish, I don't have, married to an Englishman, still can't work out this, yeah, I'm fine, tell it how it is. So there's very much an Irish trait, you know. Spoke to a gentleman downstairs, told me why he's here. Deborah Edmonds goes into the very Irish way, and now tell me how you're going to recognise the death of your brother. Oh, yeah, I did it. As night follows day, there's something about death in Ireland we're so used to that we can start a conversation. There's nothing we can't, the disasters of the world we can't talk about. But actually what I would like our employees to do, as well as our managers, is to have a two-way relationship. It's like a marriage. If you don't talk, it can become bloody awful. And working relationships, not in the, let's not get it out. I can see the quotes going back to Gatwick. Deborah was talking about me too. A good relationship at work, a healthy relationship at work is about a two-way relationship.
But it's also, Nicky and I were talking in the break about technology. And, you know, the other thing is engaging and having conversations with people. Because if we look at the young people today, they are stuck on these mobiles. And I am constantly telling my team, every time, I have indoctrinated in them, when they don't get an answer on an email, if they go, I'll email, no, you're not going to email them again. You're going to get up, you're going to go on the 6th floor, and you're going to go and talk to that person. And suddenly there's this shock of like, what do you mean, having a face-to-face conversation with someone? Not via WhatsApp. But when you start to push them further, because actually what no one ever does is no one says, you can do this. It's okay. And we were talking about how young people today, and probably some of us in this room, we are constantly on our mobiles. when do we switch off? Because part of that well-being is saying, I am going to switch off. You know, it's very much, I tell my team, I don't care how late you want to stay at the office, when you leave the office, your phone goes off.
But I'd like to bring it back a bit back to the caring as well. So we have some fantastic clients. So a big shout out to Claire from WPP, who shouted that earlier. She mentioned working in the creative industry, and there's a lot of conversation about mental health, sort of the stereotypical openness to talk about those type of things. But some of our other clients also come from tech backgrounds, and they're quite neurodiverse. And actually going to talk to someone is quite a big thing. I'm all up for people talking, not emailing them. But for some people, that is quite scary. So there is something about technology that allows people to communicate maybe in a different way. But also, it doesn't necessarily have to be about asking someone how they are. It's just about their behaviours. It might be making sure meetings finishing at a certain time and on time so people can leave at the right time. That in itself is caring. It doesn't necessarily need to be, how are you, how are you doing, let's get a coffee. It can just be in the structural processes and a very sort of rational approach to making sure you're looking after your people.
Great. So we have just a few minutes left, and I've got a very popular question here. And I'm going to ask Pauline to come in on this one, and then we'll see if we have time for others. But how do you get people to take up what's on offer? We've seen younger people lean in, but we still struggle to engage our employees over 35, especially male. And I'm assuming, could be a big assumption to make, but in the marketplace, you've got a mixture young and older. So the feedback from your champions about engaging that age group of above 35 and male.
Certainly one of the things that we really focus on is making sure that we create, that the offer is personable. So we often go out and talk to people individually and really engage them in a one-on-one dialogue around their own personal journeys, their own personal stories, and how far they'd be willing to share or want to support others. So, for example, we engaged with a number of men in the marketplace that are brokers in the broking space, where it's expected that you're out drinking, etc., constantly, and engage them to be part of a storytelling video campaign that we did, so that they could share their stories and just say, hey, I'm Dave, I'm a broker, been in the market. That's somebody that most of them are relatable to. So it's not always about finding individuals who are that are young, that are up there, put their hands up. Sometimes you have to go a little bit deeper, a little step lower, and actually have one-on-one conversations with individuals who have either benefited from support, who have said in their teams that they're really interested in supporting, and then uncovering, if you like, unpeeling and finding individuals that are willing to be part of the journey. Stories are so powerful that they really do, and if you can find people that want to tell a story that isn't the person that's out there, hey, but looks like everybody else, you're really onto a winner. So I'd say storytelling and role modelling is really key.
Storytelling and role modelling. We've got 1 minute 15, and I love this question about failing fast. So I would like each of the panellists in 10 words. Can you share an example of how you failed fast when working to support positive behaviour change? Name the programme, the activity, the type of failure it was. Vulnerability.
I think if the one for us was probably that when we launched the customer experience program, one of the biggest challenges was the fact that we wanted it to be mandatory. We wanted everyone to do it. And as much as everything we did about getting everyone on board, we underestimated those diehards who just refused. And it got to a point where we literally were just pulling our teeth going, we no longer know what we could do. And we accepted this is the situation. And sadly for us, we had to get to that point where we're now going to hit the stick approach. But if that's what it's going to take, then that's what we need to do. And it was just disappointing because what it did was it kind of put a sour moment on the rest of the program where there was all this positivity because just of a handful of individuals. So I think for us that was maybe not a failure, but it was a lesson learned.
Deborah?
God, I'm always failing. Jeez. I remember my interview with Gatwick, and I was really very clear. If I do 10 things, 6 of them I'll try and deliver. There'll definitely be 4 I'll fail from. Because actually, I think we should embrace failure. I think everyone who sits on a board of directors should have failed at some point. If you don't fail, you're not really that good at what you do. So I'm taking that because I'm a fail at 4 stuff. And the reason I say that is because unless you fail, you're not learning. and it's really important that you're learning. So there's lots of, I mean, I could have hundreds of failures. I can start back to my nursing days when I failed 3 of my exams, for Christ's sake, to stuff when I put in, even in Gatwick or HS2, around what did I need to do differently. So sometimes I've already out there, I already know where I go. I look around, my poor old team of doctors and nurses are looking at me going, what the hell is she on about? So, you know, there's stuff I will always do and learn from. I'm never 100% perfect. I am not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. Stuff I do is not necessarily perfect. I try and go with a happy balance of getting things right. I'm really passionate that actually we take some of the burden off the NHS and get people into proper psychological therapy. That's work-focused. That doesn't always work for people because actually they may not be ready in their journey, and I might be over-enthusiastic about it. But I do definitely fail continuously.
And on getting to 10 words.
Yes. So we are out of time, but I feel very unfair. We're only like a short amount of time.
We'll give you 20
Just
20
10
words.
10 words of failing fast.
So I'm on the intersection between technology and research. We're running large randomized controlled trials that are definitely not fast, but the whole point of doing research is that you see what works, and sometimes you might fail. We've been lucky so far, but there'll be some studies that we know in some populations our solution won't work, and we're going out there to find that out. On the other side, in technology, we're constantly trying out small things. So we've got a user group who are constantly testing out new solutions with, getting feedback, changing it, getting feedback, changing it. And I think that's where we fail slowly and fail quickly in different ways.
Pauline, very few words left, but over to you.
Very few words. Okay, so I can be quite a big visionary, so sometimes I forget to tell people what the other end of the vision is. So that's a really big failure. And if I bring it right back to the champions, one of the things that we did that was a failure was the fact that we didn't put enough structure, framework, and real guidance around what they were responsible for and what they weren't at the very beginning. So in our first 50, they went off rogue. The next 100, much better.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, all of you.